All right, guys, here are some examples of how to work with these three variable equations. When we're doing these problems, here's a little method that I like to do. I'm gonna go over this in class as well. I call it the guess method. And what that means is you read every problem and you represent your givens. You also represent your unknowns. You do your equation work, you set up and you solve. And what we have here is we have a 5-step procedure. If you remember to guess with every single math problem, you really stay organized and it'll make the problems much easier to solve. So remember, you're going to represent your givens, you're going to state your unknowns, you'll do your equation work, you'll set it up, and then you'll solve it. I'm going to use the guess method as I go through these examples, and hopefully you'll see the benefit of it. All right, so here's example problem number 1. It's pretty simple. With all these problems, I'll show you the problem. You go ahead and hit pause, solve the problem on a separate piece of paper, and then you can go ahead and hit play and see my solution. So why don't you go ahead and hit pause right now and solve this problem. Let's take a look at the solution. A equals B over C is pretty simple. A equals B over C, and I'm going to plug in B right away. 200 divided by 20. This is real easy here. 200 divided by 20. So we have A is equal to 10. And that's the whole deal right there. Here's example problem number 2. It's a little bit different than the first one. I'm going to look at the guess method. The first thing is to state our givens. A and C are our givens. The next thing is to know the unknown. That's B. That's what we're looking for. And then the third thing is to do the equation work. And then after that, you'll set up and solve. So why don't you go ahead and start with the equation work, since I've already given you the givens and the unknown. You do the equation work, set it up, and solve it. Go ahead and hit pause. When you're ready, come on back for the solution. All right, here we go. I have A equals B over C. So to do the equation work, I'm just going to rewrite the equation. With all of these, as stated before, I'm going to go ahead and multiply both sides by C. Why both sides? Because what you do to one side, you do to the other. And why C? Because that will get rid of these C's. And then when I rewrite the equation after I clean it up, I'm going to have B equals C times A. I'm given A and C. That can fit into the formula very nicely. I'm looking for B. That's my unknown, and that's what I'm showing here. B equals A times C. So let's figure out what B is. B is equal to 15 times 5, or B is equal to 75. And that's the whole thing. All right, here's problem number 3. We have A equals B over C again. And this time our givens are A and B. We're looking for C. So why don't you go ahead, hit pause, solve the problem. Do that by rearranging the equation first, then put the numbers in, and then tell me what C is. All right, let's go ahead and take care of it here. So we have our givens. Here's our unknown. I'm going to do the equation work. A equals B over C. I'm looking to solve for C. So I'm going to multiply both sides by C. And that way I can get rid of C on this side. And that's going to give me C times A equals B. At this point, again, I still want to get C by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by A. They're gone. And I'm going to wind up with C equals B over A. And there's my equation. This is the guy I'm going to use right here. I'm going to go ahead and plug right in. C equals 100 divided by 20. C equals 5. And that's how we solve this problem. All right, let's take a look at one more here without units. A times C equals B is the equation that we're given. Here are our givens. Here's our unknown. Why don't you go ahead and do the equation work, set up, and solve. Hit pause, and I'll come back with the solution. All right, let's get it done. A times C equals B. I'm looking to solve for C, so I can just divide by A straight away. There's no multiplication here. And I'm going to wind up with C equals B over A. C is going to be 100 divided by 2, substituting in B and A. C is equal to 50. Okay, these next few examples are a little bit different because I put units in here. Remember, units only go away if you cross them out like we did in the factor labeling problem. So why don't you go ahead and hit pause and solve this one. Okay, here's the solution. A equals B over C is a straightforward problem. Because we're given B and C, I can just plug right in. I have 150 grams divided by 5 cubic centimeters. And what that's going to equal is this: 30 grams per cubic centimeters, or centimeters cubed, however you want to look at it. And that's what A equals. Now, notice here that I just simplified the number. 5 goes into 150 30 times. But I left the grams and I left the cubic centimeters because at no point did I cancel any units out. So really, there's no difference between this problem and problem number 1 other than I threw units in here. And you'll see the same thing with problems 6 through 8. All right, here's problem 6. We have givens. Here's our unknown. Here's our equation. You need to do a little bit of equation work here and watch out for those units. You're going to have a unit here cancel out just like in factor labeling. By the time you're done, you should only wind up with grams if you did it correctly. So go ahead and pause the video and come on back when you're ready for the solution. All right, here we go. Here's our givens, here's our unknown, here's our equation. So A equals B over C. I'm looking to solve for B. I want to isolate it. So I'm going to multiply both sides by C. Have you noticed that in the first step here, I'm always multiplying by what's in the denominator when I have a fraction, and that cleans up everything on the right-hand side. So C times A equals B. This is what I'm looking for an equation. So B is going to be 2 grams per milliliters. And instead of putting it side to side like this, I just put it top bottom. The only reason why this is side to side over here, because it's typed in. It's much easier when you write it to have it top bottom just like this. Why? Because I'm going to multiply that times C, which is 100 milliliters. And when I do that, I'm just going to put a 1 here as a placeholder. These milliliters cancel out just like factor labeling. So now my answer becomes 200 grams equals B. And there we go. Same as the second problem in that the equation is still the same. The only thing that's different here is I threw in units that needed to be canceled out. All right, this one's a little tricky. We're going to solve for C here. What I want you to do is I want you to set everything up, but don't solve it, because I want to show you how to solve it. And unless if you know how. But there is a proper way to do it with having the units cancel out the right way. When you're all done, you should get milliliters. But just go ahead and set it up, and when you're ready, unpause the video, and I'll show you how to solve the whole thing. We have A equals B over C. Just like before, I'm going to multiply both sides by C. The C's will cancel, and I'm going to wind up with B equals C times A. I'm looking for C, so I want to isolate it. I'm going to divide both sides by A. The A's will cancel. And then I'm going to wind up with my equation, which is B over A equals C. And that's the equation we're going to use. All right, so let's go ahead and write it down here, but this time let's put the units in and the numbers. C is equal to B, which is 500 grams, divided by A, which is 50 grams per milliliter. Now, if you got to this point, great. And if you got to this point, you sat here and said, this is really ugly and I don't know what to do, you're absolutely right. This is ugly. Why? Because we have a fraction in the denominator of a fraction. So let's go ahead. I'm going to rewrite this a different way to something that may be a little bit more familiar for you. 500 grams over 1, I'm going to use that one as a placeholder, divided by 50 grams per milliliter. Now, if you'll notice, these units don't cancel out here. But this is also a division right here. And back in grade school or middle school at some point, you learned that when you divide a fraction by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. And all that means is this. You take your 500 grams, which was on the numerator, and you multiply, not divide, by the flip or the reciprocal of what was in the denominator. And now look what happens. All I did was take this and I flipped it and I moved it over to multiply it. Boom, the grams cancel out. And then by the time you are all done, you have 500 divided by 50, and you're going to get 10 milliliters equals C. This is as tricky as these problems can get. If you need some more practice with it, there's a couple more coming up. All right, here's the last one. We have A times C equals B. We're given A and we're given B. We're looking for C. We need to rearrange the equation a little bit. A times C equals B. I can go straight into my division here, and I can cancel out these A's. What you do to one side, you do to the other. I wind up with this equation, C equals B over A. So I'm going to throw it all in. C is equal to B, which is 120 kilometers, divided by A, which is 60 kilometers per hour. I had that fraction under a fraction again, so I'm going to jump right to this. 120 kilometers over 1 times the reciprocal of this, puts hours on top, 60 kilometers on the bottom. The kilometers cancel out. 120 divided by 60, and I'm going to wind up with 2 hours equals C. And that's the whole thing. Not bad at all. This is as hard as it can get. All right. Unless if you're watching this video, don't share this with anybody. Some extra credit problems. In order to get the extra credit here, you have to do all three. You have to use the guess method, so you have to write down your givens, your unknowns. You have to show me your equation work, how you set it up, how you solve it by canceling units, and properly represent your final answer with units. Don't share this with anybody else who hasn't watched the video, or you won't get credit. This needs to be turned in immediately when you come into class. I'll ask for it, you turn it right in.